Hi, I'm Scott with Prime Health Services and Prime Corrections. And when I'm not hosting with Sheriff Stanek, I wanted to take a few moments and talk about our offsite inmate medical cost containment solution. So if you're running a jail and you have to take an inmate offsite for medical treatment of any type, have you ever paid full bill charges for that expense? Hopefully not. But if you have, let Prime help you out. So what we do every day, we receive many bills. I'll give you one example of a bill we just processed this week. This was for a county in Florida. This was for an air ambulance treatment. The total bill, $53,256. Through our scrubbing process and negotiations, we were able to reduce that bill down to $8,447.26. That's a savings of 84%. So if you are looking to save on your offsite inmate medical expense, contact Prime. You can reach us via a link below. You can also send an email directly to corrections@primehealthservices.com. That's corrections@primehealthservices.com. Let Prime show you and let Prime help you save money. Thanks and have a great day.
And good afternoon, and we are back in another episode of As the Badge Turns podcast. So today I have the pleasure of being joined by Byron Oedekoven, and we'll go through his illustrious and storied career. He is gracious enough to join us while he's traveling. So ideally, with the power of technology, right, Byron, I can suppress any backward or background noise, and I'll do the best I can. Sheriff Rich Stanek, who generally joins me every week, he is also traveling. So you have Byron and you have Scott. So we'll just kind of jump right into it. So Byron, great to see you today.
Good to see you as well. Busy people are always busy.
We're always somewhere. So just a little bit, and then we'll just have you talk about your history. But Sheriff Oedekoven served as the sheriff of Campbell County. That was in Wyoming, right, from 87 to 2003. And that was following a tenure at the Gillette Police Department from 1974 to 1986. So let's just start with Byron. What brought you into law enforcement?
You know, it was an interesting kind of dynamic to start with. Growing up in a small rural community, drugs were virtually non-existent. You could count on one hand the number of people involved in drugs in our community. When I went off to college, it was kind of the reverse. It seemed like everybody was doing drugs but me. It was like, holy smokes. And our local sheriff kept saying, hey, you ought to come and join law enforcement. I said, I think I should. Yeah. And so started at the very beginning with the Gillette Police Department as the animal control officer.
Okay.
In 1974, and then on to an officer in 75. And I then had a trained canine on the street, full law enforcement canine. Search, track, narcotics. Worked downtown foot patrol with a dog for a year and a half.
Okay.
At 7 at night, 3 in the morning. That was an exciting time during the boom of oil, gas, coal, and all things energy related in a boom town in Wyoming. On to up through the ranks and patrol commander, and as you already said, ran for sheriff, made sheriff for 16 years in our community. We had over 100 employees, over 100-bed jail, a $10 million budget, a lot happening in our community with law enforcement and the office of sheriff, and a lot happening within our detention facility, doing our best to be accredited, certified, keep everyone safe and reasonable while they're with me.
Absolutely. So what brought you into wanting to run for sheriff? And then from when you started in 87 until 2003, what were kind of the major differences you experienced?
Thank you. Actually, at first, I didn't want any part of being sheriff. Being the patrol commander for the city, in charge of all the uniformed officers, was a great position. I enjoyed that. Making a difference, keeping the community timely, interruption of crime and what was going on, very timely. I enjoyed that. But everyone seemed to be overwhelming support for the office of sheriff. Running for that, ran against a 20-year incumbent and won overwhelmingly. So there was obvious community support and had a very nice, successful career over the course of the next 4 terms.
Absolutely. So coming in and beating out, like you said, the 20-year incumbent, Was it just time for a change, or was there something that you can recall that was decidedly different in your approach and what you brought that really stood out?
So we brought a very positive energy. We never said an unkind word, if you will, to the previous administration. No innuendos, no rumors. We just said, hey, here we are. If you like me, pick me.
Yeah.
Here's what I have to offer. Here's my experience and expertise. As the patrol went, I went to Northwestern University School of Staff and Command, which is the 10-week upper-level management class.
Okay.
I paid for half of it myself, which is how the city let me go.
Sure.
They couldn't afford to pay for the whole bill, so I paid for half of it. I think that also went over well with the community, that I was willing to invest in myself and thus in the community.
Absolutely.
That level of education and training.
No, that's great. That's great. So let's kind of jump ahead, and I guess if there's anything of note, and there is that very, very long career in that. So before I jump into post-retirement and kind of your next chapter, as I've used that term with Steve Casey, he actually used that term with himself, but I think it applies in many instances with what you've done for sure. So during that time as sheriff, from when you first started going in with the kind of view of, hey, this is me, this is what we bring. We're not talking about anyone else. We want our accomplishments to kind of stand on its own. In that time, certainly a lot transpired in that county. So is there a few examples that you would speak to today that stood out, as far as that's either an area that stood out that we wanted to further kind of highlight, or were there certain elements or areas that you really needed to address that maybe weren't there from when you first stepped into the office?
Very good. So several areas come to mind as you pose that question or opportunity. And that is, of course, the illegal activity, the narcotics, the influx of folks who are wanting to have a good time while they're working in their oil patch, or the energy field seems to attract a few hardworking, independent souls who are pretty sure they can get away with about anything, since they're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. So
Sure.
We had to deal with a little of that. The juvenile issues. So we were a very young population. For a while, we had more people under the age of 18 than over the age of 18 in our community. So the school district, youth activities, keeping up with some of the youth trials and tribulations. And then if you think about that time era, that's the pre-computerization. That's pre-cell phone.
Yeah.
I remember the first bag phone.
There's a phone right now.
Yes, going off. So timely. So modernization, keeping up with modern trends for crime prevention, for analytics of crime, for the investigation as well, for patrol activities, all of those kinds of things, keeping up with that communication. The report writing, we did computerized reports, went from pencil and paper to computerization. Same with communication in terms of telephone or mobile radio. At the end, we were just piloting into mobile data terminals. So we had made a long progression of modernization over the course of the 16 years.
Absolutely. So in that time, is there something that stands out specific to the technology advancements that I wish I had this like 5 years ago, but now that I have it, it makes a huge difference? Is there something, and it could be more than one, but there's something on the technology side that really stands out that helped further the office of the sheriff and the community?
You bet. The efficiencies that came with some of the computerization were huge. At the same time, the learning curve and the training associated with it, when you think about going from a pencil and paper spreadsheet to, at that time, it was Lotus 1, 2, 3, with precursor to Excel.
Yes.
Off a little bit. Nonetheless, my secretarial staff, when we had our first all three computers for 100 employees and 5 divisions. I mean, that was huge to have that, just the budget and the administrative process be computerized, where we could actually transmit that data to and from, made a significant difference. Same with the state, transmitting data to the state and returning it again, made it quite a bit of an impact. Communication, 911. So when we advanced 911 from the basic 911 to the precursor to what we now call a PSAP, made a significant change in access for the community to be able to call upon law enforcement for emergency services in time of need.
No, absolutely.
And on to the jail, when we policy procedure dealing with legal-based standards within the corrections facility was important for the welfare and safety of all concerned. We actually did a work with our youth that came and went from the jail, and we qualified for a classroom unit. We actually had a teacher. We provided them. So when a young person was sentenced for a crime, they were no longer away from school, if you will. If they were in for a week or weekends or 10 days, they had to complete their classwork.
Sure.
Their teacher knew where they were.
Yeah.
Their teacher was giving them assignments. And over the course of that, we graduated. I think there was over 180 people who received a GED in jail. And I was very proud of the fact that everyone that received a GED never darkened my door again.
I was going to just ask you.
Goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so very proud of the fact that we were able to make a difference in their lives and the community by virtue of they did not come back through the criminal system again.
That's great. So does that program still last today in that county all these years later?
In a different format, yes.
Yeah, okay.
They're still very active with the school district. The courts have taken a different approach with juveniles. There's not as many within the facility. There's alternative housing now that continues that continuation of education for youth to make a difference. It still continues.
Do you see that more commonly now, you know, and we'll shift into post-retirement here in a second, and then as your role as executive director. And we are joined. I'm just gonna, you know, bring in Sheriff Stanek, and I think I can get in here really quick and make this happen. There we go. There he is.
Good afternoon, guys. I'm kind of on top of you there. Move over.
Yeah. Here, I have to get out of the way. Yeah, here. I'm going to do that.
Equal billing in there somewhere.
There we go.
Another day in DC.
Yeah, there. See, don't you wish I could move you around the screen like you could be moved in traffic? Yeah.
Where are you going to put me now?
No, I think you're good. So, let's see. Now I'm cutting off. So this is fantastic for folks that are just listening to this thinking, okay, what exactly are we doing? And I'm sure I feel confident, but I'll let you know for sure after we finish the editing and we post this, how much of the sneezes and the coughing, or am I able to successfully suppress all that? So to be determined, but again, so far so good. So let me just kind of arrange everyone here on our screen. There we go. So as we were, again, welcome Sheriff Stanek. So far, and not to recap because you could just listen to the beginning part of this on the podcast, but so far we've had just a great conversation with Byron just through his early years and what was kind of monumental as it relates to his county. And we spent a little bit of time just on the impact on schooling and the youth. And I was just asking as you joined, so do you see that common across many states and many counties, or do you feel, or more so believe and experience that Wyoming was really leading the charge, and have others picked up? Because frankly, I haven't heard of programs like that myself, and maybe some organizations aren't making, and maybe they exist, I just don't see them as much. But in that regard, that's something to really highlight, where you said, and I loved your little saying, basically, I never saw anyone at my door again. So it's working, right? The goal is to rehabilitate, right? To get back in society and be able to contribute. So that's a great story. So what have you seen through your travels as you're sitting now in an airport lounge, you know, and seeing different cities and counties and states, common or not so common, and how they approach?
I think it has a lot to do with general region, the sheer population base. It's harder to accomplish with huge numbers. It's easier with fewer folks, fewer juveniles, less crime. So in the rural areas, we also have less resources. So we're very cognizant of the idea of making a difference early, or as we say, early age intervention. If we can strike while the iron's hot, make a difference in a young person's life early, intercede, if you will, then with luck, we make them conclude that, a life of crime is not in their future and a way they can go and become or continue to be a law-abiding, productive person. So it's important to be able to do that. And you're
Absolutely.
right. In some of the areas, that's not that common. It's kind of or it's not within their ability to be able to do. And it's unfortunate that they aren't able to do that.
Is it, I get it, you know, smaller area, you can have, at least you can attempt to have more control versus a larger population. But is it also just a willingness to try it? It's like, well, there's too many, so I'm not going to try. Not that no one wants to give it their best shot, but what has been your experience, again, in your travels in saying, you just kind of have to give it a shot and see if it'll work, and maybe some of it will stick. So is it the ability and the will to do it compared to the population size, or is it more so, yeah, it's a lot of effort, I may not want to try that? How many care versus don't care?
I think let me reverse back into the answer.
Or the coughing too was in my
Oh, no.
not yours either. It's like, get the guy a cough drop. Yeah.
So I think the desire is there, the will is there. The ability is not there in many areas because when you're going call to call to call, emergency service to emergency service, it's tough to allocate resources to something else, not as urgent, and then to dedicate the funding to that as well, and to take those resources away from patrol investigations, special crimes, narcotics, and all the issues we're dealing with today. I mean, who'd have thunk we'd have this much of an issue of immigration or fentanyl or a host of issues that were unheard of not that many years ago. And now we're dedicating a lot of resources to that. And it'll be difficult as we do our best to involve citizens, groups, nonprofits. Some are stepping up and helping, and I'm hoping more continue to do that.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Sheriff Stanek, I'll let you get a word in here. You know, in Hennepin County, and then again in your travels, do you know, I think again it's just the ability to actually affect change, right? That's extremely difficult. You can be as persuasive as the next person, but it doesn't always work. So in that, just if we hit on just the youth and that cycle, right, of not having repeat and not getting back in jail, did you have a different experience? And again, because many years ago technology was still being developed, and so there weren't as many programs. Certainly the size of the county matters, but did, you know, any similar thoughts, comments you have to what Byron is just speaking to?
You know, I was really excited about having Byron on the show. Sheriff Byron has been everywhere. First off, I never see him without the Stetson, or what I call a cowboy hat.
Yeah.
So this is the change. But I understand he's on his way over to Ireland with family, and you're going to enjoy a couple days. But I just think it's really fascinating. You know, I come from the upper Midwest in terms of law enforcement and sheriffing. Byron comes from the West, the deep West, right? Wyoming and all places beyond. You know, I wonder if people wonder if the differences between sheriffing, whether you're on the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwestern part of the country, is different or the same. You were just talking about technology. I did not have, not that I don't have, but I did not have cattle rustling in Hennepin County. Maybe Byron does where he's from, or things like that, things that he has to worry about with his residents and constituents to protect public versus what we have to worry about. I'm sure he had the same problem with guns and shootings and juvenile crime and car theft and those things, but I'm sure that there are some key differences between what, you know, just between us, much less others around this country. We work with 3,100 sheriffs nationwide. What do you think, Byron? You got differences like that?
Oh my gosh, yes. Regionally, I mean, we don't wrestle with alligators as animals running at large, but we do deal with, as you mentioned, livestock theft. You know, and here the last several years, that's huge. You know, people think about stealing a pickup or stealing a car and having a $10,000 item of value. You put 5 heifers in the back of a horse trailer in about 6 or 7 minutes with a trained cattle dog, and you're going down the road with that same $10,000 or more in the back of your trailer. So yes, we're cognizant of several different kinds of crimes that are unique to the West that we have to train and staff for, which takes a whole different approach to many of the things that we deal with in the West.
And I don't mean to minimize it by any means, but I mean, like, I worked for Minneapolis Police for 30 years. We had 2 officers per car. I would doubt that in the state of Wyoming, you had 2 deputies or 2 officers per car. In fact, your backup probably was a heck of a long ways away. You've got some very large, expansive grounds to cover. And I think that's interesting in and of itself. And I herald you because I would hate to be out on a highway at 2 a.m. stopping somebody for whatever reason, knowing that my closest backup or partner is 35 minutes away. I mean, it's got to be a whole different experience.
If you're lucky, only 35 minutes away. We actually wrote an article for for the Western States Sheriff's Association, First Cut magazine, in which we titled it, "Our Nearest Backup is a Citizen with a Rifle in his gun rack in the back of his truck," because that's who's going to come over the hill first. It's not going to be the responding officer who's 30 minutes or an hour away. And that's so our relationship with our citizens is a little different as well. And fortunately, we enjoy a very high satisfaction rate with our citizens as their attitude toward law enforcement in the West. And I'm very proud of that as well.
And then, Scott, same thing about the jails and correctional care and services that Prime provides to the sheriffs and your clients. The types of inmates that we have are probably pretty similar, right? A drunkard is a drunkard is a drunkard. A disorderly conduct is a disorderly conduct is a disorderly conduct.
Yeah.
But there's some differences there as well, I'm sure.
No, for sure. And I'm glad you mentioned that. So, in that, can you speak to the, time in as sheriff and then the jail? And like as Sheriff Stanek said, there's certainly an overlap with the type of individuals that were residents, right? But in that regard, from when you started till your and we haven't even gotten to your post-retirement, so this might be episode 2 in the future. So we'll find you at a place with not so much background noise. Can you take us through a few minutes as it relates to, the interactions in the jail and working through the cost control or attempt for cost control and the different dynamics and mechanisms that you had to deal with?
So fortunately for us, early in the detention, in my career with the detention arena, we did not have huge medical issues per se. Not like today where over 50% of our clientele are on psychotropics, as an example. Early in the career, I might have one instead of nearly half of the population. Same with major medical issues. Because as I said, in the boom community, we were a young, hardworking, relatively fit population. So therefore, we didn't have some of the medical issues that you would encounter in a more diverse aged community. But nonetheless, we also didn't have the experience with a lot of that. So we relied on folks like the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare to help provide some of that guidance on policy, procedures. And then we relied on, actually, Sheriff Stanek, and I've discussed his nursing staff and his facilities actually help provide education opportunities for the state of Wyoming on several different occasions, because we became good friends with the nursing staff in Hennepin County, and they were very active in the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare and helped us with our policy and procedure development early on. So in the long end of the world, it's a small world to now circle some nearly 30 years later. Here, the former sheriff of Hennepin County and I are sitting together on the same podcast, and 30 years ago, there we were.
No, absolutely. That's great. Yeah. So from a post-retirement, and again, Sheriff Stanek earlier, and I'll have to give a nickel to Steve Casey because I used his chapters analogy. So now as you go into another chapter in your career as an executive director of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs, having all those years of experience, right? And then going into it. So in that next role, how were you, what, I guess in that regard, hey, I'm glad I went through these last few decades. Now what can I do to provide guidance and direction for a recently elected sheriff and for any of their staff. And if you can walk a mile in my shoes, I'll tell you how you can be better for the community. So what things stood out as far as your lessons learned that you were able to provide at that point?
Very good. So Wyoming is somewhat unique for a lot of reasons in a lot of areas. But one of them is that we are a joint association of sheriffs and chiefs.
Yes.
So we have sheriffs and chiefs of police. We're one of 3 states that are a combined association, Washington, Nevada being the other 2. We actually patterned our bylaws after the Washington model,
Okay.
if you will. And my experience up through the ranks with the police department, of being an active member with the International Association of Chiefs, having been through Northwestern University School of Staff and Command, helped on the city side of the association, if you will. And then as the elected sheriff for 16 years, doing the types of activities that we just talked about, and having gone through the FBI National Academy as well. So it led to a very good background, a very diverse background for looking at managing a joint association of 65 police chiefs and 23 sheriffs on behalf of the state of Wyoming. The selection process was a unique process to come up. There were 16 people who had applied from around the country, narrowed down to 4. Your award for my position was the governor, the attorney general, the U.S. attorney, the head of the county commissioners, the head of the city and municipal group, and two others. So it was a little on the very serious group of individuals
Absolutely.
to select someone to lead and to participate with the Joint Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs. And then my role was primarily to get us fiscal solvency, to establish that pattern of practice where law enforcement was on the edge, cutting edge of proper policy, proper procedures, practices within an agency, so that we weren't being controlled or regulated by the legislature. And then working with the legislature on state statutes necessary to modernize in much regard. If you think about the time era, 2002 going forward, the impacts on law enforcement and what we needed to legislate to be able to deal with. For example, the methamphetamines, the spice, the evolving marijuana, of which Wyoming still doesn't allow marijuana. I'm thankful, on my watch. So that's good.
Absolutely.
And working with the national groups. So interacting with the national sheriffs, international chiefs, medical community to be able to bring back those kinds of examples and policies back to Wyoming to make a difference.
No, that's fantastic. So and I'll let you jump in, Rich. In that 20 years, what stands out? And I know you mentioned a few things, but if you can quickly summarize, what stands out as your greatest accomplishments, or were you most proud of during that tenure?
I think in fiscal solvency of the association, we were able to bring in grants, effectively do and provide the services of those grants, what was called for, deliver the deliverables, what was required of a grant, and be known as the group that you could call on if you need something done. We were in many a meeting with the Department of Health or the Department of Family Services or the governor's office, and someone would say, "Is Byron on the line?" Yes. Well, let's just have him do it. He'll do it and do well.
Nice.
That reputation,
Absolutely.
I think is worth a lot, and I'm very proud of that reputation and with Wyoming. Carrying that one step farther, my peers elected me chairman of the Committee of States for the National Sheriffs, and served in that role for 2 years.
Nice.
And that was very rewarding to be able to bring in the speaker's presentation, run the meetings, and some still say I did a pretty dang good job of that, all told. So I think I wrestled you around a couple of those meetings and made sure you were in and out and on time.
That's fantastic. We'll spend a couple more minutes. And again, I appreciate you making the time today. And Sheriff Stanek too. Again, everybody's traveling. I'm actually in our home base in Franklin, Tennessee today. Dare I say, as the badge turns U.S. studio. Here, I'll say that, right? Yeah, let's make it sound really big. But, again, the whole idea is to bring individuals like yourself, Sheriff, to the airwaves, to the screen, no matter where you're at in the world, to be able to tell the story. And so I will say now, I want to extend an additional invite in the future when we have less background noise, so we can kind of get into the into other chapters of this story, because definitely advocacy and public safety, I'd love to get more detail on that. I know you're a staunch advocate with training, as you talked about with the management course with Northwestern. Again, additional conversation around juvenile justice initiatives that you spoke to. Again, advancing new technologies, where it went from Lotus 1, 2, 3 to the advancement of computers. Like, just seeing that whole timeline and what evolved, I would love to get more in detail. And certainly, um, some additional bills that were impacted, either you led in Wyoming. I think that would be very interesting. So I'm teasing this out purposely, so that way when we do a future episode, there's going to be some definite descriptive stories and conversations we can get into. Before we wrap up, again, I want to hand it back over to Sheriff Stanek for any additional comments, for sure.
Well, I know, Byron, that this will resonate with you, but as I told Scott, this is about protecting the office of sheriff one podcast at a time. And you are but one in a long line of legacy sheriffs who are going to grace us with their presence and help educate people about what it means to be a sheriff, what it means to work with partners like Scott and Prime Health, what it means to run a correctional facility where you, in my case, we booked 40,000 people a year in and out. In some cases, maybe not that much, but just as important and just as dangerous. And I'd also be remiss, Scott, as we wrap up, not to say, hey, look, I'm out in Washington, D.C. this week for National Police Memorial Week. We added, I want to say, about 300 plus names to the National Peace Officer Memorial. I went to a candlelight vigil last night where they read the names of officers who were killed in the line of duty all over this country, in the 50 states and the 6 territories that make up the U.S. and our, like I said, our partner territories. It was humbling.
Sure.
There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. It was candlelight at night. And seeing the families of fallen officers sitting in the front row, second row, third row, there was just a sea of people, 25, 30,000 of them gathered on the Capitol Mall. Even though it was raining really, really hard and I got really, really wet and I'll probably get pneumonia out of this thing, it was well worth it, because it brought you right back to why it is that we do what we do every single day. And thank you to you and Prime Health for sponsoring this and allowing us to share our insights about what's happening in law enforcement and sheriffing across this great country.
Absolutely. It's the least we can do. I appreciate and value what you gentlemen have done in your career. I can't even compare, the sacrifices you've made. You put your life at risk to provide for a better tomorrow for all the citizens, for everyone that can appreciate law enforcement and what it stands for. Exactly, Sheriff. Both sheriffs. We want to continue to provide this as a forum for conversation, for topics, for awareness. As always, please follow us on Spotify, on YouTube, anywhere you stream. You can check out As the Badge Turns. This is episode 3 with Sheriff Byron Oedekoven. I just love how that sounds, Oedekoven. I'll say that over and over again. This was Leadership, Law, and Legacy with Sheriff Byron Oedekoven. As always, we appreciate your time. Sheriffs, thank you for making the time. And again, everyone out there, please follow, subscribe, spread the word, and let it be known. And we'll have some great conversations in the weeks to come. So for now, until next time, thanks and have a great day.
Sounds good. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott with Prime Health Services and Prime Corrections. And when I'm not hosting with Sheriff Stanek, I wanted to take a few moments and talk about our offsite inmate medical cost containment solution. So if you're running a jail and you have to take an inmate offsite for medical treatment of any type, have you ever paid full bill charges for that expense? Hopefully not. But if you have, let Prime help you out. So what we do every day, we receive many bills. I'll give you one example of a of a bill we just processed this week. This was for a county in Florida. This was for an air ambulance treatment. The total bill, $53,256. Through our scrubbing process and negotiations, we were able to reduce that bill down to $8,447.26. That is, that's a savings of 84%. So if you are looking to save on your offsite inmate medical expense, contact Prime. You can reach us via a link below. You can also send an email directly to corrections@primehealthservices.com. That's corrections@primehealthservices.com. Let Prime show you and let Prime help you save money. Thanks and have a great day.